I had something really unexpected, very unexpected, happen to me this week. My son's 20-year-old beat-up old Saturn station wagon, which actually looks better in this picture than it really looks. I'm pretty sure the car photoshopped this image of itself on its social media site. Just, because, never mind, I was going to say something about, because you all do it, right? Because I stalk you on Facebook. You don't... Wow, you look really good on Facebook. But anyway, so I need to move the car, and so I thought, all right, I'm going to kill two birds with one stone. I'm going to drive the car so I can move it. At the end of the day, long story short, I punted last minute on the idea, ended up driving my car instead. But here's the unexpected part. Later that morning, I had to park my car just in a very visible public location on a busy street. And then as I was later getting back into my car, this thought fleeted through my brain. It's just like, oh, I am so glad I didn't drive Ben's beat-up old Saturn today. And the second that thought fleeted through my brain, it was like, what in the world? Because, first of all, I knew exactly what I meant. I meant, I am so glad I didn't drive my son's beat-up old car because I would have felt embarrassed to be seen driving it. It's hard to admit that, but there it is. That's what I meant. And what was surprising to me was, when did that happen? Where did that happen? I think cars have become important to me. And that was surprising and unexpected because if you've known me for any length of time, you know that most of my adult life, I've driven really old, beat up old cars. I really have. And I could have cared less. But somewhere, completely unexpected to me, I was brought face to face with this realization, or I should say that somewhere along the line, cars became attached to my identity a little bit. I'm embarrassed to admit it, but again, there you have it. My car was too important to me, and that shocking realization actually tied in to the message that I was preparing to preach this week for this morning. And you guys probably don't know this, but I'm not a big fan of when God shows me how my sermon applies to me. It's just supposed to be for y'all. All right? But anyway, in this Victory Message series that this is now week 2 of, we're looking at how God has won for us victory in the areas of life that matter most. Victory in the cross of Christ. And victory over areas of what we're calling habits and hang-ups. So I would guess that for most of us, when we hear the words habits and hang-ups, we think to ourselves, this sermon is for somebody else, not me, right? Because I don't have any habits or hang-ups. People with bad habits and hang-ups are people who are like addicted to alcohol or drugs or pornography or something. Right? I won't make you show your hands, but I suspect that's where a lot of us, that's where our brain space goes. And thank God that those particular things that I've just mentioned may not be issues for some of us. But what I want to do this morning is I want to approach this topic of habits and hang-ups from a little bit different perspective, a perspective in which I believe this message is for you and me. And probably for all of us. And so there's a different expression for habits and hang-ups that's actually so old, it's brand new. The saints of old talked about what they called disordered attachments. Let's say that together. Disordered attachments. And disordered attachment is just simply an emotional or psychological dependence on some person, object, or activity. Let's read that definition together. It's an emotional or psychological dependence on some person, object, or activity. In simple terms, a disordered attachment is anything in our lives that has become too important, like the car we drive, I don't know if you know anybody like that. All right? Some of us may not struggle with physiological dependence on substances like alcohol or have drug habits, but I suspect that we all have emotional or psychological dependencies. Attachments that have just simply become too important in our lives. And so take a moment to think about that. I'm going to pray while you're thinking. Heavenly Father, we just ask that by your Spirit you would rest on us. Lord, make this a safe place for us to step into maybe some hard discoveries about ourselves. But more importantly, Lord, would you draw us out of things that are getting in the way of something better that you have for us? And so, Lord, work in our minds so that they're clear to hear, and our hearts that they're clear to hear what you want to say to us this morning. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so what I want to do is dig down a little bit deeper into this idea of disordered attachments. First, we're going to look at attachments. An attachment just simply means a desire, an affection, a want, or a need. Now, that's a pretty broad definition for attachment, and that's important, though, for you to keep in mind, because I think most of us think of attachments or hang-ups or habits in terms of illegitimate vices, right? Like I mentioned a little bit ago. Illegitimate vices that are out of bounds, like cocaine. But attachments actually are things like desires or needs, and they can be desires and needs that are in bounds. Desires and needs that are not necessarily illegitimate in and of themselves. So here's an example. Let's take sleep, for instance. Illegitimate need, legitimate need. What do you think? Yeah, it's legitimate. It's a legitimate human need. It's a God-created, God-given legitimate human need, right? It's not like sleep is cocaine. Hey, buddy, I need to score some sleep. You got any of the good stuff? Actually, I probably would buy black market sleep. Now that I think about it, I would. Even if it was illegal, I would probably buy sleep. But the idea of sleep is in bounds. But listen. Sleep can become a disordered attachment. All right? Sleep can become too important. And in which case, I'd like to suggest to you that sleep, a natural, God-given, legitimate need, can in fact become something illegitimate in our lives, very much like cocaine. I'm going to talk more about that in a moment. But the big idea here is attachment is not necessarily just some evil, bad, illegitimate need or desire or fix in our lives. It can be something that is a legitimate desire, an affection, a want, or a need. All right. But these attachments then, these desires, these needs, these affections, this person that an attachment is has fallen on, or an object, the attachment can become disordered. Say disordered. All right, I've written these things down, and these are in your YouVersion notes, by the way. If you're following along in the YouVersion Bible app, I've included these questions just so you could better reflect on them. So an attachment can become disordered when it becomes too important to us, when it binds us, when it exerts authority or power over our lives, over our will, over our thoughts to such a degree that I'm incapable of saying no to it. Or I'm incapable of saying yes to God, right? An attachment can be disordered when we use it in excess of our needs. Say excess. It's disordered when we use it in excess of our needs, when we use it for purposes other than that which God created it for and intended it for, all right? An attachment can become disordered when my dependence upon it is more than what reason would dictate. Do you know anybody like that? So what I want you to see is almost any desire or attachment can become disordered. We can become inordinately emotionally dependent or psychologically attached to, here's a list, desire to make money, We can become inordinately attached to possessions, to the yearning to be admired, to the approval of others, to pride, to power, to the need to give orders instead of following them. We can become attached to busyness, to comfort, to physical fitness, to our appearance, to being religious, to entertainment. We can become attached to sexual pleasure, to food, to sleep, to being in the in crowd, to being in the know, to being in the limelight. We can become attached to emotional obsessions with people who are out of bounds to us. We can become just psychologically attached to diseased thought patterns. We just can't not go to the grind in our mind. Right? There's just almost an endless list of things that we can become attached to. I have seen parents with a disordered attachment to a child. Right? So here's what I want you to notice. Almost every attachment on this list, I would have argued, is in some measure rooted in a legitimate God-given desire or need. Right, we go through the list. I mean, money, beneath that at its core, is the need to be provided for, right? Possessions, again, a need for provision, admiration, a God-given need to be loved, approval, right? You go through the list. At its core, I'd like to suggest to you that beneath these are legitimate God-given needs. But somewhere along the lines, I'll talk about this in a moment, the problem comes when our legitimate God-given desires and needs becomes disordered, literally out of order. They become an end in and of themselves rather than a means to an end. And they crowd out everything else. They become too important. They become unreasonable. And so again, let's visit the example of sleep. It's reasonable for adults to get about 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night because that's what medical studies are. Right? Everybody's looking around like, once again, this goes back to black market sleep. I would kill to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep. But the medical studies say the average adult needs about 7 to 9 hours of sleep to function healthy. To function healthy. All right, that's reasonable. But you show me an adult who sleeps 12, 14, 16, whatever, hours a day, something is probably wrong. There might be something wrong physiologically, but there might be something wrong emotionally or psychologically. Sleep has become too important. There's something about this legitimate God-given need to sleep that has become disordered. Does that make sense? Legitimate need all of a sudden becoming something illegitimate. And so, just to sum up where we are, a disordered attachment is this emotional or psychological dependence on some person or object or activity. It has become too important. And so what I want to do is just take a moment now for us to personally reflect. If you've been around the vineyard, we say we want to do more than just download information into your brain. We want to provide space for you to actually interact with the Lord, with the Spirit about the things that He's downloading to our hearts. So ask ourselves this question: do I have any desires or needs or affections that have become too important, to which I've become emotionally and or psychologically dependent? And so invite the Lord to show you something that might even be unexpected. I'll give you space. Woo! All right. You know, here's something. If nothing came to mind for you, does anyone notice? Don't raise your hands. So I'm not that. Just like when there's silence, there's something in your spirit. It's like not in your spirit. Something inside, just like must turn on TV, must turn on music, right? What is that all about? Must go get something to eat. And watch TV. Yeah. All right. So what does God say about victory over habits and hangups? What does God have to say about victory over disordered attachments? The first thing I want to tell you that God says is going to be something that I think is going to surprise you. God says creation is good. Say that aloud with me. Creation is good. You guys know this from Genesis 1:31. After God created everything, it says God looked over all that he had made and he saw that it was very good. Now, why in the world would it be important for us to know that God says creation is good when it comes to our disordered attachments? Like, I think you're kind of going the wrong direction here, right? What does this have to do with habits and hang-ups? So listen to this. I think this is an important place to start. And by the way, just as a footnote here, I realize this could have been like a 2-month series. And so I'm only scratching the surface this morning. But this felt to me like this is the right place to start. And why? Listen to this. It's because I think that a lot of us have become inordinately attached to a legitimate God-given need or God-given desire because somewhere along the line, somebody told us that our legitimate needs and our legitimate desires were illegitimate. And we believed them. Did you hear that? I think some of you missed it, so I'm going to just read it again. I think that a lot of us have become inordinately attached to legitimate God-given needs and desires because somewhere along the line somebody told us that our legitimate needs and desires were illegitimate and we believed them. And so that means, I don't know if we have this on the next slide. What's the next slide say? Nope, go backwards. I didn't put it in here. So listen to the kinds of lies I think many of us have believed. So we've believed that my body is bad. We believe that my appetites are bad, that food is bad, that my sexuality is bad, that beauty is bad, that pleasure is bad, that enjoyment is bad, that rest is bad, that sleep is bad, that my emotions are bad. You getting the idea here? Somewhere along the lines, I think we bought that load of crock. All right? The list goes on of legitimate needs and desires that God himself built into his good creation. God put those things into the human condition. And he said, it's very good. Did you hear that? All right? And listen to this. Connect some dots. This is going to be important for some of you. So beyond building legitimate needs and legitimate desires and legitimate pleasure and enjoyment and delight into his good creation, he built provision for those very desires into his creation. He built provision for our needs. He built provision for our legitimate desires into the goodness of his creation. Did you hear that? So he not only created the need, he created provision for the need. One more step that's going to bake your brain. Listen to this. God also then intentionally built into all of this, not just provision for his God-given needs, or for our God-given needs, but he built into his creation the human capacity to legitimately enjoy and take pleasure in his provision for our needs. Did you hear that? He created in us the capacity to delight in our needs being legitimately met. God in his goodness and in his creativity, all right, this goes creativity encounter stuff. God in his goodness and in his creative design created us with emotions, right, that register things like pleasure. Emotions that register delight and goodness and beauty and satisfaction and deliciousness and. That was God's idea, emotions of pleasure. This was also God's idea. In his goodness and his creative design, he created us with physical bodies that see beauty and goodness and hear beautiful things. We hear goodness. We smell goodness. Right? We taste goodness. We feel, we touch goodness. Does it make sense? That was his idea, that we could, with our physical bodies and with our senses, delight in his goodness providing for the good needs that he built into us. And God in his goodness said, oh, look at what I did. This is good. This is very good. I mean, I've taught on this before. Did you know that Garden of Eden literally means pleasure? It means pleasure. It means delight. It's almost a scandalous word. Because in our modern, well, I'm not going to go there. But it's almost scandalous. The garden, God created us to live in a garden of delight. Yeah. So let's go back to this food example. Our Creator God, our good Creator God, created us with a legitimate need for nourishment, and he created good food to nourish our legitimate need. It doesn't include zucchini, by the way. Not good. Legitimate need for nourishment. He created lots of things that were meant to be eaten to nourish us. And moreover, he created us with senses and emotions with which we can legitimately enjoy food. We can legitimately delight in the goodness of food. All right? God says to us, take and eat of my creation. Enjoy nourishment. Enjoy nourishment. Not just eat kale. Enjoy. I've given you taste buds that register deliciousness for the purpose of being nourished. Enjoy nourishment for your need because my creation is good. But somewhere along the line, someone told us it's all bad. It's all very bad, and we bought it. With the result that something good got all messed up. It got all disordered in our hearts. We doubted the goodness of God, and so we take his provision out of bounds. All right? We doubt the goodness of God, and so we take his provision out of bounds. We doubt the provision of God, and so we live in this scarcity mindset that hoards and consumes and overindulges in excesses of our need. We doubt the goodness of our legitimate needs, and we doubt the legitimacy of this thing that's been created in us to delight in that which is beautiful and delicious. And so we take this legitimate desire that we've now doubt, and we turn it into something illegitimate. Does that make sense? because we doubt the legitimacy of it, we actually turn it into something illegitimate. And all these doubts about what God has said good ends up with us actually turning something that God said is good. We believed it was bad, and then we actually end up turning it into something that's bad. All right? We fixate on it. We become inordinately attached to it in our lives. And so I think you're going to have a moment just when we respond in ministry time to reflect on this. But here's the question. I don't think I put it in the screen either. Nope. So can you think of anything in your life that God has said is good, but you bought the lie that it is bad? All right, just think about that. You'll have more time to reflect in a moment. So God says creation is good. Here's the second truth, and this is where I'm going to actually wrap up. Next truth on the screen is our delight in the good creation should point us to delight in the good creator. So let's read those top 3 lines together. Our delight in the good creation should point us to delight in the good creator. And so listen to this. In creating this good world in which God has placed you and placed me, and he's endowed it with goodness and beauty and delight and deliciousness, and he's provided us the ability to perceive beauty and deliciousness and delight with our various senses that he gave us. All right? But we just need to keep in mind that even the very best and the very delicious, most delicious and the most beautiful in his creation is really just a meager reflection of God's own beauty and delight and pleasure and deliciousness, etc., etc. And it's God's intention that we enjoy the created beauty as a way of leading us to the creator, not the created as an end in of itself. That make sense? So our delight in the good creation should point us to delight in the infinitely superior beauty and deliciousness of the good creator. And we see this truth in passages like Ecclesiastes 2:24 through 25. I love this passage. So, if you're familiar with the book of Ecclesiastes, the writer is just kind of making his way through life, just trying everything to try to fill the emptiness in his heart. And he just concludes that, nope, that doesn't work, that doesn't work, that doesn't work. And this is his conclusion. I decided there's just nothing better than to enjoy food, enjoy creation, enjoy drink, and to find satisfaction in the work of my hands. That's a good verse, people, to memorize, to find satisfaction in the work of your hands. And then I realized that these pleasures, scandalous word, that these pleasures are from the hand of God. For who can eat or enjoy, take delight or pleasure anything apart from him? The pleasures of life that we're to embrace, food and drink and satisfying work, is from the hand of a scandalously pleasureful God. Psalm 37:4. So take delight in the Lord, and he will give you your heart's desires. Listen to this. This is, oh no, I'm not going to be there yet. So the delights and the desires of the human heart are ultimately found in the good creator. And when our pursuit of the delicious stops short of the ultimately delicious, when it stops short of the creator and becomes fixated on merely the created, for us to prefer the created over the creator is for us to prefer a lesser good. To prefer a lesser deliciousness. It's to prefer this is to prefer a lesser pleasure, a lesser delight, a lesser beauty, a lesser satisfaction. If our hearts are attached to that which is derivative, if our hearts are attached to that which is finitely good, if our hearts are attached to that which is finitely good, we will be unable to attach in a transforming way with that which is infinitely good. Does that make sense? Let me read a quote. Author Jim Manny, what's the name of the book? What do you want? Author Jim Manny, the name of the book is What Do You Really Want? I'll tell you what I want, what I really... Wow. Wow. Oh, mercy me. Yeah, no. With the song? Or no, with the message. Okay. I wasn't sure what you wanted there. What do you really want? This is what the author writes. So, listen, this is good. So we're... I lost it. We're done. All right. We're accustomed to thinking about growth in virtue, so our Christian growth, as a matter of curbing our appetites and desires, as if our appetites only drive us towards the dark side. Well, some do, but also we desire God, and our deepest desires are for growth and for change and for a fuller, deeper life. And so God speaks to us through these desires. They motivate us to become the people God created us to be. And so we get in trouble not because we're captured by our desires, but because we're not captured by our deepest desires. Isn't that good? That's good. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to change gears a little bit. I've invited Joe Losi to come up and just share a little bit of his story of his journey of freedom, walking in victory over areas of habits. And so let's pull up these stools. Hey, why don't we go ahead and have the worship team come up while we're doing this? We can come up to the table here. So is this in the way? You see? All right. So just share. It should be on. No. It's not on? It is on?
Is it on? Okay.
All right. So just share with us just a little bit about your own journey over areas of habits, hang-ups, disordered attachments.
Okay, so early on, I think the easiest way to start this off is my first experience with some disordered attachments would be in the form of coping mechanisms, denial, and just a full-blown believing of lies. As my parents were divorced when I was in second or third grade due to a parent's alcoholism, and ultimately the death of that parent led to a pretty predictable cycle of denial and coping mechanisms in my younger years that transformed as I grew older into high school, middle school and high school, into drinking, smoking, and using drugs. Again, all just a way to fill the void of what didn't exist. That, at that time, didn't seem like a life-controlling issue. It was something more of a hurdle or a hiccup, something that could be given up, walked away from as I transformed my life from being a high school student to an adult and a real-world member. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case, and I found myself again in that cycle, just in a deeper and darker place of needing something to get me by or get me through the day. Initially, that was in the form of pills and with alcohol, and it wasn't until 3 or 4 run-ins with the law and ultimately a choice whether I was going to choose alcohol and those drugs over my family, that I made a decision to try to get some kind of help in the form of AA initially and Celebrate Recovery. I walked into those with my own mindset and my own agenda, knowing that as long as I learned the curriculum and knew what this was all about, I could understand it and get over this.
Well, if I could ask this question, so in a kind of a traditional habits and hang-up sense, so you became aware that, I mean, that it was substances, there was alcohol, there was drugs, but you said you knew there was something behind this that was an emotional thing. Now, so were you aware of it at the time, or it was just all of a sudden it's just like, oh, alcohol has a hook in me, or something like that? So tell us about the journey of how you began to discover, oh, there's something deeper down that's driving me towards these substances of choice.
I think all along I knew that there was something deeper and more sinister involved in this. And I think really it wasn't until I was faced with that decision, you have to choose. You have to be a big boy, so to speak. You have to make this choice on your own. Are you going to let this run your life, or are you going to take what God has given you, blessed you with, and live in His glory? I took it on my terms, because that's what I do. And
so what do you mean by that? I took it on my terms.
My terms. I'm gonna accept this, but I'm gonna do it my way. I really at that time I don't think was ready to give up or even dive into what was the issue behind all of it. I was just ready to appease the people who were hurting because of what I was doing.
So what helped you to turn the corner? In what ways have you found that, just connecting with the Lord's heart over you has helped move you in a journey towards freedom?
Well, I'd like to say it was right then and there. Unfortunately, it wasn't. There was a lot more pain, a lot more heartache and division, almost ultimately ending my freedom, my family's relationship with me, and the future of our family. It came down to the choice between literally freedom and prison. And the choice was I either allow somebody to search my vehicle with the possibility that I can get help and put this behind me, or I can maintain the attitude and the bullheadedness, and they're going to take me to prison anyways. And that was the first moment I could feel God truly encounter and intervene and give me that sense of peace that said, trust me. And I did. I said, okay, search it, open it. And within an hour, I was watching the police detectives leave my house without me. And
that's
with
good.
The conditions that I was going to do this program that I'd already talked about doing with my family and loved ones, and I had a certain amount of time to do it, but it was really going to happen, and I know that was persuaded. It was set in motion and kind of set in concrete when God said, okay, you're really going to do this. That was where I realized that I guess the underlying issue wasn't just a dependency. It wasn't a condition of drug abuse or alcoholism, because there had been so many things. It was a heart issue. It was a wound that had been left undealt with. It was wide open, and it just kept bleeding and bleeding, and I was trying to stop the bleeding with Band-Aids, and it's not going to happen.
Right. And you found the Lord's coming into that place of woundedness. Is it fair to say it was a father wound, childhood woundedness, and you're finding the Heavenly Father meeting you in a place, and that's changing what is the physiological, fix.
It began as a father wound, a human father wound, and I think I turned that into a Heavenly Father wound, where I blamed and resented God so much that I knew that there was no way that choosing to hand this over to Him was going to be the answer, or even help me. So that was kind of a transformation, when I felt him encounter me and just say to trust me. And that one simple act of obedience and faith is literally the turn.
Yeah. All right, so here's a question. For some people, their encounter with Jesus just radically sets them free from areas of addiction. It's just like, I was addicted to this, I gave my life to Jesus, and boom, I stopped instantly. Some people don't have that experience, right? It's a fight, it's a battle to try to move forward. But any thoughts about why that's different?
Yes.
I'm glad.
This is my opinion.
Okay.
To take it for what it is. I felt that experience. I literally believe that God changed me at that moment. When I decided to give it to him, that was it. I didn't have that affliction any longer until I chose to open that door, until I chose to pick that back up, take it back from him. And I think that's a decision we all have to make on a daily basis is, do we wake up willing to give everything to God and go to bed believing that we've left it all in his hands? Or do we pick it up at 9 o'clock in the morning the first time we have an altercation or something stressful happen? And that was my experience. I was changed. I am changed. I'm a different person. I'm a new creation. And I have the choice to step away or to try to maintain control of the things in life that cause me to separate myself from God.
All right, so last question. I don't know how we're doing on time here, by the way. Oh, wow. So what would you say, here's what we're going to do. So I'm going to ask you this question, and then actually Sheldon, I'm going to invite you up. I'll transition back here. So you'll have the mic all by yourself, and you can go as long as you want. So, and if you need to go, because it's about the end of the time. But, so what would you say to the person out here who's just realizing, man, there's something that has a hook in my heart. I've tried to kick this thing so many times, and they feel hopeless, like I'm never going to beat this thing. What would you say to that person? So you can preach. I'm going to go back and I'm going to be a guitar player now.
I'd like to hold y'all here for a long time, but quite simply, if you believe in the power of the cross, then you have to believe that that power is still alive and able to free you from anything. I mean, I like to believe that my story is pretty intense and a pretty good testimony to God's love and Christ's sacrifice for us. But there's way better stories out there, and they're happening every day. It's just a decision that these people make, and the choice to commit your care and your will to life's or to Christ's control.